The president canceled the most important political dinner of the year and replaced every wealthy guest with children who had nothing. But what happened when those orphans sat down at the table prepared for ministers and ambassadors would reveal a truth so powerful that it would transform an entire nation's understanding of leadership forever. Before we continue, I need to ask you something that matters. When was the last time you helped someone who could never repay you? Have you ever given something valuable to someone the world had forgotten? Leave a comment below and share your story. And please, hit that like button and subscribe, because this channel brings you stories about compassion and courage that remind us what truly matters in this broken world. President Ibrahim Traoré sat in his office on a cold December evening, looking at the guest list for the annual presidential Christmas gala that would take place in just 5 days. The paper in his hands contained 100 names, each one representing power, wealth, or political influence. There were government ministers and their wives dressed in expensive clothing. There were foreign ambassadors who would arrive in luxury vehicles with diplomatic plates. There were business owners who controlled millions of dollars and wanted favors from the government. There were military generals covered in medals and ribbons. There were traditional chiefs wearing golden crowns and ceremonial robes. Every single person on this list was important according to the standards of the world. Every single person expected to attend because they had attended every year before. The Christmas Gala was the social event of the season in Burkina Faso, where the powerful gathered to eat expensive food, drink imported wine, listen to classical music, and make connections that would benefit their careers and bank accounts. But as President Traoré looked at this list, he felt something unexpected stirring in his heart. He felt sadness. He felt disappointment. He felt conviction that something was terribly wrong with this picture. What are we really celebrating? He asked himself quietly. Is Christmas about impressing powerful people, or is it about something completely different? His mind went back to his own childhood in a small village where his family struggled to survive. He remembered Christmas seasons when there was barely enough food for a simple meal, when gifts were impossible, when his mother would gather the children and tell them stories about baby Jesus born in a stable because there was no room anywhere else. Jesus was born among the forgotten people, his mother had told him. He did not come to the palaces of kings first. He came to shepherds in fields. He came to the poor and humble. That is the real meaning of Christmas. President Traoré had never forgotten those words, even as he rose through military ranks and eventually became leader of his nation. But somewhere along the way, the Christmas celebration at the presidential palace had become just another political event, just another opportunity for the elite to gather and celebrate themselves. He picked up his phone and called his chief of staff, Madame Ouattara, an efficient woman in her 50s who had organized government events for 3 different presidents over 20 years. Madame Ouattara, please come to my office. I need to discuss the Christmas gala. She arrived within 5 minutes, carrying her planning folder thick with documents, menus, seating arrangements, and schedules. Yes, Mr. President? Is there a problem with the preparations? Everything is proceeding on schedule. The caterers are confirmed. The decorations are ordered. The invitations have all been sent. I want to cancel it, President Traoré said simply. Madame Ouattara's eyes went wide with shock. Cancel it? Mr. President, the gala is in 5 days. 100 important guests are expecting to attend. The food is already ordered. The musicians are hired. The diplomatic protocol has been arranged. We cannot possibly cancel now. It would be a disaster. I do not want to cancel the dinner itself, the president clarified. I want to cancel the guest list. All of it. I want completely different guests. The chief of staff sat down slowly, looking confused and worried. Different guests? Mr. President, I do not understand. Who would you like to invite instead? President Traoré stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights spreading across Ouagadougou in the darkness. Somewhere out there in those streets were children sleeping in doorways because they had no homes. Somewhere out there were orphans in overcrowded facilities, forgotten by society, with no family to celebrate Christmas with them. Somewhere out there were street children digging through garbage looking for food, while the wealthy prepared to eat 5-course meals. I want to invite orphans, he said quietly. I want to invite the street children. I want to invite the forgotten ones, the ones nobody cares about. the ones who have never sat at a table with fine plates and good food. I want to fill this palace with children who have nothing." Madame Ouattara was silent for a long moment, and when she finally spoke, her voice was shaking. "Mr. President, are you serious? You want to replace government ministers and foreign ambassadors with homeless children?" "Yes, completely serious. That is exactly what I want to do." "But Mr. President, the political consequences will be severe. The ministers will be offended. The ambassadors will consider it an insult. The business leaders will be angry. These are powerful people who expect to be honored. If you reject them, they may turn against you." President Traore turned back to face her, and his eyes were calm but absolutely determined. "Let me ask you something, Madame Ouattara. When you were a little girl, what did Christmas mean to you?" The question surprised her. She thought for a moment before answering. "My family was not wealthy. Christmas meant my mother somehow finding a way to make something special, even when we had almost nothing. It meant sharing what little we had. It meant being together with people we loved." Exactly. Christmas was never supposed to be about impressing powerful people. It was supposed to be about love and generosity, especially toward those who have the least. When did we forget that? When did Christmas at the presidential palace become just another political obligation? Madame Ouattara's expression softened. She had worked in government for so long that she had forgotten to question why things were done certain ways. "You are right, Mr. President. But practically speaking, how would this work? How do we find these children? How do we bring them here? How do we prepare them? Some of these street children have never used silverware, never sat at a formal table, never worn clean clothes. The international media will be covering this event. What will they think?" "Let them think whatever they want," the president replied. "I would rather be criticized for honoring the poor than praised for ignoring them. As for the practical matters, that is why I have you, Madame Ouattara. You are the best organizer in this government. If anyone can make this happen in 5 days, it is you." She took a deep breath, and slowly, a small smile appeared on her face. "You are asking me to do something impossible, Mr. President. But perhaps impossible things are exactly what we need more of in this world. Okay, I will do it. I will make this happen. But you must be prepared for the anger and criticism that will come." "I am prepared. Send formal letters to all the original guests explaining that this year's gala has been redesigned as a special humanitarian event focused on the nation's most vulnerable children. Thank them for their understanding and inform them there will be other opportunities to gather for official functions. Be polite but firm." Madame Ouattara nodded and stood to leave, but the president stopped her. "And, Madame Ouattara, one more thing. I do not want this to be just a dinner where we feed children one meal and send them back to the streets. I want to make this meaningful. I want each child to receive new clothes, school supplies, and arrange for follow-up support. Work with the Ministry of Social Services to create a program that continues helping these children after Christmas is over." Tears appeared in Madame Ouattara's eyes. "Yes, Mr. President, it will be my honor." Over the next 4 days, something remarkable happened across Ouagadougou. Social workers from the Ministry of Social Services went into the poorest neighborhoods, to the orphanages that were falling apart from lack of funding, to the street corners where children slept on cardboard, to the shelters that were overcrowded and desperate. They brought an invitation that seemed impossible to believe. "The president of Burkina Faso invites you to Christmas dinner at the presidential palace." Many children thought it was a joke or a trick. Street children had learned not to trust adults who made big promises. But the social workers were patient and sincere. "This is real. President Traore wants to celebrate Christmas with you. He wants you to be his honored guests. We will provide transportation, new clothes, everything you need. All you have to do is say yes." Slowly, carefully, 100 children were selected from the thousands who needed help. They ranged in age from 6 years old to 16. Some were orphans who had lost parents to disease or violence. Some were street children who had run away from abusive situations. Some had disabilities that made them unwanted by potential adoptive families. Some had spent their entire lives in institutions, never knowing what a real family felt like. Each one had a story of pain and loss. Each one had learned to expect nothing from the world. Each one had built walls around their heart to protect against disappointment. On December 23rd, buses arrived at orphanages and shelters across the city. The children climbed aboard nervously, still not quite believing this was real. They were taken to a community center where volunteers were waiting with tables full of new clothes, shoes, and hygiene supplies. "Choose whatever you like," the volunteers told them. "These are yours to keep." The children moved through the tables slowly, touching the clean fabrics with wonder. Many had never owned new clothes before, only worn hand-me-downs with holes and stains. A girl named Aminata, who was 12 years old and had lived in an orphanage since she was 3, picked up a beautiful red dress and held it against herself, looking in the mirror with tears streaming down her face. "Is this really mine?" she whispered. "Really mine to keep?" "Yes, sweetheart, it is yours. Merry Christmas." Aminata hugged the dress against her chest and cried like her heart was breaking open. A boy named Musa, who was 10 and had been living on the streets for 2 years since his parents died, stared at a pair of new shoes like they were made of gold. His feet were covered in scars and sores from walking on hot pavement and rough ground with nothing but torn sandals. "These will fit you perfectly," a volunteer said kindly, kneeling down to help him try them on. When the shoes were on his feet, Musa stood up and took a few careful steps, then a few more. Then he started running in circles around the room, laughing with pure joy because his feet did not hurt for the first time in years. The volunteers helped the children bathe and dress in their new clothes, treating each one with gentleness and respect that many had never experienced before in their difficult lives. Hair was washed and combed carefully. Faces were cleaned gently. The children looked at themselves in mirrors and barely recognized the clean, well-dressed young people staring back at them. On Christmas Eve morning, the buses arrived at the presidential palace, and 100 nervous children stepped out onto the grounds they had only seen from far away. The palace looked like something from a fairy tale with its white walls and beautiful gardens. Guards stood at attention, but instead of looking stern and frightening, they smiled warmly at the children. "Welcome," the guards said. "You are our honored guests today." Madame Ouattara stood at the entrance with her staff, greeting each child personally. "Welcome to your palace," she told them. "Today you are not visitors. You are family." The children were led into the grand hall, and what they saw made them stop and stare with mouths open in amazement. The room was decorated with thousands of lights that twinkled like stars. An enormous Christmas tree stood in the corner, covered with ornaments and presents underneath. Tables were set with white tablecloths, fine china plates, crystal glasses, and silverware that gleamed under the chandeliers. Fresh flowers filled vases on every table. The room smelled like pine trees and cinnamon and roasting food. It was the most beautiful thing most of these children had ever seen in their entire lives. But the children also felt fear creeping into their hearts. They did not know how to act in such a fancy place. They did not know which fork to use or how to sit properly. They were afraid of breaking something expensive or doing something wrong that would make the important people angry. A little girl named Fatima, who was only 7 years old and had been abandoned at an orphanage when she was a baby, started crying quietly. "I want to go home," she whispered to the social worker beside her. "I do not belong here. This place is too nice for someone like me." The social worker knelt down and hugged her gently. "You belong here more than anyone, sweetheart. You will see." At that moment, President Ibrahim Traoré entered the hall. But he was not wearing his formal military uniform or an expensive suit. Instead, he wore simple traditional clothing, the same kind that ordinary people wore in villages across Burkina Faso. He walked directly to the children with a warm smile on his face. "Hello, my young friends. Merry Christmas. I am so happy you came to celebrate with me today." He approached little Fatima, who was still crying, and gently wiped her tears with his own handkerchief. "Why are you sad on Christmas Day?" he asked softly. "I am scared," Fatima admitted in a tiny voice. "I do not know how to eat at a fancy table. I will do everything wrong. Everyone will laugh at me." President Traore sat down on the floor right there in his traditional clothes, so he was at eye level with the little girl. "Can I tell you a secret?" he whispered. I grew up in a small village where we ate with our hands from a shared bowl sitting on the ground. The first time I attended a formal dinner, I was so nervous that I drank from the finger bowl because one thought it was soup. Everyone did laugh at me, but you know what I learned? Making mistakes does not make you worthless. Being afraid to try new things is much worse than doing something wrong. Today, you are my teachers. You are going to teach me and everyone here what really matters in life. He stood up and addressed all the children in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear. I invited you here because you are the most important people in Burkina Faso, not because of money or power, but because you represent something essential that our nation must never forget. You represent courage because you survive each day despite having so little. You represent hope because you keep going even when life is hard. You represent the future because what we do for you today will determine what kind of country we become tomorrow. So please, do not be afraid. This is your home today. Sit wherever you want. Eat whatever you like. If you do not know which fork to use your hands. If you spill something, we will clean it up together. There are no mistakes here, only children who deserve to be loved and celebrated. The tension in the room broke like a dam bursting. The children began to smile and relax. They moved toward the tables, still cautious but no longer terrified. President Traore sat down at the main table and invited children to sit on both sides of him. Aminata in her red dress sat on his right. Musa in his new shoes sat on his left. Other children filled the remaining seats while palace staff served food with the same respect they would show to foreign dignitaries. The meal was magnificent with roasted chicken and rice, fresh vegetables, fruit salad, bread still warm from the ovens, and desserts that made the children's eyes grow wide. But more important than the food was the conversation. President Traore talked with each child, asking about their lives, their dreams, their hopes. "What do you want to be when you grow up?" he asked Aminata. She looked down shyly. "I want to be a teacher, so I can help other children learn to read. But that is probably impossible for someone like me." "Why impossible?" the president asked. "Because I am an orphan, with no family and no money for school fees. Dreams like that are for other people, not for me." President Traore set down his fork and looked at her seriously. "Listen to me carefully, Aminata. Your circumstances do not determine your worth or your future. I was also poor. I also had nothing. But I refused to believe that poverty was my destiny. If you want to be a teacher, then you will be a teacher. I give you my word that we will find a way to support your education. Your dream is not impossible. It is just beginning." Tears ran down Aminata's face again, but this time they were tears of hope instead of sadness. "Do you really mean that, Mr. President? You will help me go to school?" "I really mean it. You and every child here today. We are going to create a special scholarship program for children from orphanages and difficult backgrounds. Education will no longer be impossible because of money. If you work hard and want to learn, we will make sure you have that opportunity." Around the room, other children were having similar conversations with palace staff and volunteers who had been invited to serve and interact with the young guests. A boy named Ibrahim, who was 14 and had been living on the streets selling plastic bags to survive, talked with the Minister of Education who happened to be visiting to see what the president was doing. "I had to stop school when I was 9 because my father died and my mother was sick," Ibrahim explained. "I had to work to buy food and medicine. I loved school so much. I still remember everything I learned. Sometimes at night I find old newspapers in the trash and practice reading by streetlight so I do not forget how." The Minister of Education felt his heart breaking as he listened. Here was a boy with intelligence and determination, forced to waste his potential because of circumstances beyond his control. How many others like him existed across the nation? "What was your favorite subject?" the minister asked. "Mathematics," Ibrahim answered immediately. "I loved solving problems. I was the best in my class before I had to leave. My teacher told me I could be an engineer someday, but I know that will never happen now." "What if I told you it could happen? What if we found a way to get you back in school?" Ibrahim's face showed both hope and fear of disappointment. "People say nice things sometimes, but nothing ever changes. I have learned not to believe in promises." The minister pulled out his phone and typed something quickly. I am sending an email right now to the director of the National Technical School. I am telling him about you. I am asking him to reserve a place for you in the next term. I am also arranging for a monthly stipend so you can focus on studying instead of selling plastic bags. This is not an empty promise, young man. This is happening." Ibrahim stared at the minister with an expression of shock and disbelief. His hands started shaking. His breathing became fast and shallow. Then suddenly he put his head down on the table and sobbed like a child, his shoulders shaking with the force of emotions he had kept buried for 5 years of struggle and survival on the streets. The minister put his hand on the boy's shoulder and let him cry, understanding that sometimes tears are the only possible response when hope returns after being gone for so long. Across the room, President Traore watched these interactions with deep satisfaction. This was what he had wanted. Not a fancy political dinner where wealthy people impressed each other, but real human connection between those who had power and those who had been powerless. Not empty charity that made donors feel good but changed nothing, but actual commitment to transforming lives and creating opportunities. Not performance for cameras and international praise, but genuine compassion expressed through concrete action. He stood and tapped his glass to get everyone's attention. The room grew quiet as 100 children and the palace staff turned to listen. "My young friends, I want to explain why you are here today. Christmas celebrates the birth of Jesus, who came into this world as a poor baby born in a stable because there was no room in the comfortable places. His first visitors were not kings and rich people, but simple shepherds watching their sheep at night. This tells us something important about what God values. God does not measure worth the way humans do. God does not care about money or power or status. God looks at the heart. God loves the humble and the forgotten. God lifts up those the world pushes down." He paused and looked around the room at faces watching him intently. "Our nation has been celebrating Christmas at this palace for many years, but I think we forgot the real meaning. We invited important people and served expensive food and congratulated ourselves on how sophisticated we were. But we forgot about you. We forgot about the children sleeping in the streets. We forgot about the orphans in overcrowded facilities. We forgot about the young people struggling to survive with no help or hope. That was wrong. That was a failure of leadership and compassion. So today we are correcting that failure. Today, you are the honored guests. Today you sit at the tables prepared with the finest things we have. Today you are treated like the valuable, important, beloved children you truly are." The room erupted in applause, and many of the children were crying openly now, overwhelmed by being seen and valued for the first time in their lives. President Traore continued speaking with emotion in his voice. "But I do not want this to be just one special day that you remember while nothing else changes. I want this to be the beginning of something much bigger. Starting today, our government is launching the National Orphan and Vulnerable Children Initiative. We are going to increase funding for orphanages and children's homes. We are going to create scholarship programs for education. We are going to provide job training for older youth aging out of the system. We are going to make sure every child in Burkina Faso has a chance to build a good life, regardless of their family background or economic situation." He gestured to Madame Ouattara and several ministry officials standing along the walls. These leaders have committed to making this happen. This is not a political speech with empty words. This is a promise backed by budget allocations and policy changes that begin next month. Your presence here today is not charity. It is a reminder to everyone in government about who we are supposed to serve and why we do this work. The children listened with expressions of wonder and hope spreading across their faces like sunrise. After the meal, President Traore invited the children to the Christmas tree where presents were stacked in colorful wrapping. "Each of you has a gift with your name on it. Please find yours and open it here together, so we can share the joy." The children rushed to the tree with excitement, searching through tags until they found their names written in careful handwriting. For many, it was the first time they had ever received a present with their own name on it, the first time they had ever owned something chosen specifically for them. Fatima, the 7-year-old who had been crying earlier, found her present and tore open the wrapping to discover a beautiful doll with brown skin and bright clothing. She hugged it against her chest and whispered, "She looks like me. I have never had a doll that looks like me." Musa opened his present to find a soccer ball, something he had dreamed about for years while playing with balls made of plastic bags and string. He held it like it was made of diamonds, running his hands over the clean surface, barely believing it was real. Aminata discovered books in her package, including a journal with blank pages and a set of colorful pens. "For writing your dreams and your story," President Traore told her. "Every teacher begins as a student who loved learning. Start writing today." One by one, each child opened presents chosen with thought and care, not random items, but things connected to their interests and dreams. After the presents, musicians began playing traditional Burkinabe music, and President Traoré invited the children to dance. He kicked off his shoes and danced with them, laughing and clapping, completely unself-conscious about his dignity or presidential image. The Grand Hall, that usually hosted stiff, formal ceremonies, now rang with children's laughter and the sound of bare feet on marble floors. Outside the palace, news of what was happening had spread across the city and the nation. Television cameras that had expected to film the usual political gala instead broadcast images of orphans dancing with the president. Social media exploded with reactions. Some people praised President Traoré, Nan's compassion and moral courage. But others criticized him harshly. Government ministers who had been uninvited complained publicly. Foreign ambassadors expressed confusion and mild offense about the broken diplomatic tradition. Political opponents called it emotional manipulation instead of real leadership. But President Traoré had expected all of this criticism, and he did not care. He was not governing for the approval of the powerful. He was governing according to his conscience and his understanding of what his nation truly needed. That evening, a journalist approached the president for an interview. "Mr. President, your critics say this is just a publicity stunt and that you have damaged important political relationships. How do you respond?" President Traoré looked at the children still dancing around the room. "Look at their faces. Look at the joy and hope you see there. Then tell me if you think this is worthless. These children have been invisible their entire lives. Society has ignored them, stepped over them, pretended they do not exist. Today they were seen. Today they were valued. Today they were told that their dreams matter. If that offends ministers and ambassadors, then I accept their offense gladly." He gestured around the Grand Hall. "This palace, these fine things, the power of the presidency, none of it belongs to me personally. It belongs to the people of Burkina Faso. All the people, not just the rich and connected. If I use these resources only to impress other powerful people, I have failed in my duty. But if I use them to lift up the forgotten and create opportunity for those who have nothing, then I am doing exactly what a leader should do." As night fell and the celebration finally ended, buses arrived to take the children back to their orphanages and shelters. But they were not the same children who had arrived that morning. They carried presents and new clothes, yes, but more importantly, they carried something internal that had changed. They carried dignity from being honored. They carried hope from being promised a better future. They carried confidence from being told their dreams were possible. Little Fatima hugged President Traoré before boarding her bus. "Thank you for the best day of my whole life. I will never forget this. Never. Ever." He hugged her back gently. "You are very welcome, little one. And remember, this is not an ending. This is a beginning. Work hard in school. Be kind to others. Build the future you want to see. I believe in you." One by one, the children said goodbye and boarded the buses, waving from windows as they drove away into the night. In the days following Christmas, the story spread far beyond Burkina Faso. Videos of the president dancing with orphans went viral on social media. Images of children opening presents were shared millions of times. People around the world were touched by a leader who chose compassion over politics. Donations began pouring in from ordinary citizens wanting to support the programs for vulnerable children. The criticism from offended ministers was drowned out by praise from common people who finally saw a leader representing their values, and the children themselves became ambassadors of hope. Aminata did become a teacher years later, returning to work in the same orphanage where she grew up. Musa became a professional soccer player and advocate for street children. Fatima became a social worker, helping other orphans find the love she had discovered that Christmas Day. The National Orphan and Vulnerable Children Initiative transformed thousands of lives over the following years, breaking cycles of poverty and creating opportunities where none had existed before. And it all started because one leader had the moral courage to ask a simple question: what are we really celebrating? If this story touched your heart, hit that like button right now and subscribe. Comment below and tell me about a time someone showed you kindness when you needed it most. Share this video with people who believe that how we treat the vulnerable reveals our true character. Thank you for watching, and remember, the measure of a nation is how it treats its most vulnerable children.